Hello, I hope you are doing well. Thank you for clicking on this video. I am going to take you through today a workout predominantly focused on your posterior chain. So this is all of your hamstrings, your glutes, all of your erector, spinae, those beautiful muscles that help you flex and extend the back. Also into the lower and the middle fibres of your traps as well. And just generally your pelvic and core stability as well. I would highly recommend this video in the mornings before you start work, and the reason being it can be really easy, especially if you have a not so great work setup. First thing you do is you really hunch those shoulders forward and the head stoops. You don't have your core turned on. Hope you enjoy this one. I'll be giving you a few different little modifications throughout this one as well. Yeah, let me know how you go. We are starting our practice today in the prone position, so our forehead is relaxed onto our hands, and we're just starting with some pelvic tucks. So this is super basic, anyone can do this. We just want to slightly tuck our pelvis in, so pressing that pubic bone into the floor, bringing it up to the belly button. The abs will slightly contract. Now I want you to remember this throughout the rest of your prone practice. So that's any exercises on your stomach. Really opens up that space through the lower back. Our next move, we're just going into a single hip extension. So lengthening out through the legs, drawing the kneecap up towards the hip, and we're squeezing the glute to lift. Now remembering that pelvic tuck as well. If this feels really challenging for you and you can't seem to get the leg off the floor, pick up a bolster or a blanket, place it under your pelvis to allow for a little bit more movement through that leg. We're doing about 6 to 8 of these on each side and then progressing it, and we're working through the hamstrings as well. So you can see here I'm bending the leg to 90 degrees, squeezing the glute and the hamstring to lift the knee off the floor and extending that leg out nice and long. Remembering you also have the option to put that bolster or blanket underneath the pelvis for a little bit more range of motion, or just to allow and open up some space. You can see that I'm lengthening out through the leg, so you want the leg to be nice and long as you extend it out. And then just alternating sides, so really starting to warm up through the posterior chain here. Now we want to keep that upper body nice and relaxed, so the head just stays relaxed onto the hands. That upper body is super relaxed, so all that's working is the glutes and the hamstrings. So for our breath here, we're inhaling to extend the hip with the knee at 90 degrees. We're exhaling to straighten the leg out, squeezing the glute, inhale to return, exhale to lower back to the floor. Okay, so we're going to spice it up a little bit, start working through that upper back. We're interlacing the palms and then just placing them behind the back, drawing the shoulder blades down and back to lift. Now, if this is too much, you can place your hands on the floor just beside your head and just press up, keeping your hands and your elbows on the floor, lifting the head and the shoulders off. So we're working through all of those fibers of the middle and the lower trapezius here. Really helps to open up the chest. I love this one before sitting at a desk all day because it really just opens up through the chest, activates all those little muscles in the back that help you to stand up straight and have a beautiful posture. So progressing this here, if you want to progress. If you don't, feel free to just continue with that first exercise. The hands are on the forehead and we're just drawing those shoulder blades down and back, squeezing the scapulas together to lift. Remembering here that we want to be just gently tucking that pubic bone towards the belly button to open up space in the lower back. You'll notice as well your glutes contract a little bit here as well, so we're really warming up that posterior chain. Starting to work through the triceps now. This one it looks super simple, but I promise you it is not. We're reaching the hands past the hips, rotating through the shoulders. We're going to get that tricep activation from really reaching through the fingers and squeezing the tricep to extend the arms. If this is too much, bring the head down to the floor and just reach the hands past the hips. We want our lower back to be nice and relaxed here as well. Returning to those hip extensions, we are going to add in a rotation. So really opening up through the hips, stretching through the hip flexors, which is definitely needed before a day of sitting down or a day of working. Do not stress about bringing your foot all the way to the floor in that rotation. If your spine does not allow for that, do not push through it. Just go where you can, and you will gradually open up more space in the hips. From this press stretch, we're going to start to press forward into a swan. However, we want to take this one nice and easy. So spreading all the fingers nice and wide, pressing them into the floor actively and keeping that core engaged. So remembering that prone pelvic tuck, we want to keep doing this as we come into our swan. So not forcing our spine into a movement that it does not want. Just gradually bringing those hips lower to the floor each time, keeping those toes flexed. And then as we move through this practice, you'll see that I'm bringing the hips closer towards the floor and lowering back down to the floor. Okay, I know you're going to hate me for this, but we are going to come into a plank. We're going to go into an elbow plank, so just bringing the elbows to the floor, the palms will be together, the feet are at hip distance apart. Engage the core, use the core to press up into that plank. Keeping the glutes nice and tight, hips are in line with the shoulders, pressing the elbows into the floor, draw the belly button towards the spine. If this is too challenging, bring those knees down to the floor, we're almost done. Okay, from here we are going to move into a different series. So moving into a side lying series. Now, I like to think of this one as like a little Pilates nap. So in our side lying series today, our hands, our shoulders, our hips will be in line, but our feet are just coming slightly forward of the body, and this is going to allow for a little bit more stability in this position. So we're just coming in a front to back swing, so the leg comes up to hip height, we're flexing the foot to come forward, we're gliding it backward and then pointing the toes. The challenge here is to keep that pelvis as still as possible, not swinging back or forth. If this is too much, feel free to bend that bottom leg into a clam position. We're squeezing the glute as the leg comes further behind the body, and as the leg comes in front of the body, you really need to engage your core to create that stillness through the pelvis. I think I did about 8 of these. To be honest, I often lose track. Now here we're going to slightly externally rotate that foot so the heel faces towards the front, the toes come towards the body. I just put my hand behind my head for a little bit of instability to challenge myself a little bit more. We're keeping that bottom leg nice and straight. Again, you can come into clam if this is too much. And we're using that glute to control the leg up. There is no momentum. Just progressing here. This one is a really nice progression for your side plank. So you're on your elbow. May seem very simple, but it's an amazing way to get into a side plank safely. So you'll see I just pressed my waist up to show you the movement that's happening. So often when we're on our elbow, we can really sink the waist towards the floor, but we actually want to create a lift. So I'm inhaling to lower down, I'm exhaling to press up and squeeze those obliques to press me up into a side plank preparation. So now we are going to go into an actual side plank. So that exact same movement we just did, we're pressing the side of the waist as we exhale to lift up and holding for around 10 seconds. You can always come onto your knees as well, stack the knees rather than stacking the feet. So all the exact same movements we just did then, with those, starting with those front to back leg swings. So your glutes should well and truly be working by now. So the leg is at hip height, remembering you always have that option to bring that bottom leg into a clam position rather than being straight out. keeping that core switched on to control that movement from front to back. Even if your leg only comes a little bit further forward and then a little bit further back, that is okay. Just starting to increase that range of motion as you get stronger. The next one is those external rotation side kicks. So you're squeezing your glute to lift up. If that hand behind the head is too much, bring it down to the floor, give yourself a little bit more stability. You also may not be able to kick as high as I can. That is a lot of practice. Moving into those side plank preparations again, we're inhaling at the bottom, exhale, press the side of the waist into that side plank preparation. So just a word on your alignment here. We want to have our feet just behind the body, our knees just in front of the body, and then our elbow is below our shoulder. And then we're pressing the elbow and the palm into the floor as the waist presses away from the body, so that when we come into that side plank, as we are here, which remember you can come onto your knees as well. When we come into that side plank, the side of the waist is really working to press up into that side plank. And this whole time you're in that side plank, I want you to focus on those obliques, mind-muscle connection with those obliques. Next thing is we're going to hit some abs coming onto our sit bones. Knees are bent hip distance apart. Inhale in a nice and tall position. Exhale, we're curling through the spine, creating a beautiful C shape, activating the abdominals. Inhale at the bottom, and then exhale to reach yourself to come back to that neutral position. And going again, so inhale at the top, exhale to roll down. It's almost like you've been punched in the stomach, creating that beautiful C shape through the spine. And then exhale to roll yourself back up. You can also take your hands to your thighs if this is a little bit too difficult, but make sure we're pressing the feet into the floor. If the feet are coming off the floor, bring them a little bit closer to the hips. Taking the hands to the thighs, inhale, hold, exhale, press your hands into the thighs, meanwhile resisting by bringing the knees outward, and then inhale to relax. And you'll notice your core just starts to engage naturally as you press your hands in towards the thighs and relax, coming all the way back down to the floor. Press the lower back into the floor to imprint the spine. Bring the legs up to tabletop, keeping the knees above the hips. If this tabletop position is too much for your oblique curls, just bring the feet down to the floor, hip distance apart. We'll inhale at the bottom, exhale, draw the rib towards the opposite hip, elbow comes towards the opposite knee, the eyes are gazing past the opposite knee. Beautiful, so we're flattening out that rib cage, keeping the elbows nice and wide, knees stacked on top of the hips. Good, we're progressing this in a moment, so I think we're doing about 8 to 10, just with those oblique girls to warm up in that motion. On the next one, we're extending that leg out nice and long, and then just alternating sides. If this is too much, you can relax the head between each rep, and then just curl up for your next rep, or alternatively, just continue with those oblique curls. This one can be quite intense. You only need a few to really feel that burn. And just bringing the knees towards the chest for a little bit of a relief through those abs before we move into possibly my favorite Pilates positioning, and that is a 4-point kneeling series. So starting by working through actually we're not working through the hamstrings, we are doing some cat-cows first, so just mobilizing the spine. So the hands are stacked under the shoulders, we're pressing all our fingers into the floor, the knees are underneath the hips. We're inhaling to come back to a neutral, and exhale to come into a cat, and then inhale back to a neutral, exhale to go into your cow. So moving through these in your own time, doing as many as you need. I like to do about 5 or 6. And just breathing through that movement to really support that flow through each movement. From here, we're going to go back to into our active series. So I like to bring my knee towards the center, working through the hamstrings here. So if this series becomes a little bit too much on your wrist, feel free to roll up your mat for some padding underneath your wrists, or come down onto your elbows for the first component. An important cue here, which you can see I self-corrected for this one, is bringing the back of the rib cage up towards the sky. And we're keeping that core switched on, belly button towards the spine. The hamstrings and the glutes are working here. So the hips remain square to the floor. We're using the glutes and the hamstrings for those extensions and flexions. And then adding in a cat-cow here. So our abs will contract to come into that cat to press the knee in towards the chest. Those arms stay straight, but the elbows are still unlocked. We're remembering our breath here. So inhale to bring the knee in towards the chest, exhale to come into an extension, and just alternating sides, bringing that right knee into the center of the body, working through the hamstrings here, remembering the back of the rib cage lifts towards the ceiling, the belly button presses towards the spine. We're squeezing that hamstring to lift. The leg is at 90 degrees. I think we're doing about 8 to 10. And then from here, you'll extend that leg out and then come into flexion. So that hamstring and that glute is working to keep the leg up. The hips are square towards the floor. You're almost done here. So that posterior chain will definitely be working here. Coming into a cat-cow. Contract the abs to bring the knee towards the chest. So it's a partial stretch, but you're also working those beautiful posterior chain muscles, pressing the hands actively into the floor. Almost done. Pressing the hips down to the floor, just coming into a stretch to release all those beautiful muscles that we just worked. We are going to come into one of my favorite hip flexor stretches. We're coming into a kneeling pose, bringing one leg forward, one leg is on our knee. We're just slightly tucking the pelvis, leaning forward just a little bit, only a few inches, reaching that hand over the bent leg. So we're stretching through the side of the waist here. We've done a little bit of side body work as well, oblique work, alternating sides. So I'm just showing you here how I'm tucking the pelvis, and you don't need to lean far forward at all to get that stretch through the hip flexors. If that side stretch is too much, stick to just your deep hip flexor stretch on your own. Thank you for spending this 20 minutes with me. I hope you have a wonderful day, and let me know how you found this.